Welcome to Thursday's 6-1. The headlines this evening. Gatwick grounded, travel chaos after illegal drones force flight cancellations and leave thousands stranded.
We stranded 4 hours inside the plane without any information.
Not the best start to Christmas anyhow.
Planning for a no-deal Brexit, a warning that avoiding a hard border could prove challenging.
If you don't have alignment on customs and regulations, then you get into real difficulties.
And concerns raised over safety at Irish courts following an incident at a Dublin courtroom. The Taoiseach has issued a stark warning that unless the UK maintains its existing customs and regulations following a no-deal Brexit, then avoiding a hard border becomes more difficult. Leo Varadkar's comments follow the publication of the government's contingency plan in the event of the UK crashing out of the EU without agreement. Our political correspondent Paul Cunningham has the details.
A plan for the worst possible Brexit outcome. That's what this government contingency planning is all about, and the scale of the endeavour is colossal. More than 40 pieces of legislation would have to be rushed through the Oireachtas. If they were introduced in January, that would mean taking up all of the available debating time until Brexit Day. A no-deal Brexit would have severe impacts on the Irish economy and compel Irish politicians to make significant and difficult decisions. That's the stark and sobering analysis contained in the government's contingency plan, a document which will be enlarged in the coming weeks. The complexity of Brexit is made clear in the report. It details over 130 pages, efforts to protect Irish food exports into the UK, guaranteeing access to life-saving medical supplies, expanding ports and airports for new customs, dealing with limits on UK flights into the EU, and new security concerns over EU arrest warrants. Opposition parties have welcomed the document but argue it doesn't go far enough.
I don't see any short-term planning contingency measures in place that will really buffer the agricultural sector, and obviously the exposure to a drop in the price of sterling will severely impact agriculture and also tourism.
The possible return of a hard border in a no-deal Brexit was addressed by the Taoiseach today. He said it wouldn't necessarily happen if customs and regulations remained the same in the Republic and the North.
Now, if the UK crashed out of the European Union at the end of March, they would still be aligned on customs and regulations. So the problem would only arise if they decided in some way to change their customs and regulations. And that's where it could get difficult. But that's something obviously we're going to have to talk to them about in a no-deal scenario. And it's also something we'll have to talk to our European partners about. And we've had some of those discussions already.
However, according to Sinn Féin, the government simply isn't providing enough information on its strategy.
There's a responsibility on the Taoiseach and on the government in terms of plans in the event of a hard Brexit to explain to the people of this state and the people of the North what their plans are, and it doesn't do that in the plans which have been published today by Minister Coveney.
The Taoiseach insisted again today that he's not preparing for a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. He said the best way to avoid a hard border was to have a deal, and there is one on the table. However, if that deal is rejected by Westminster and if Britain crashes out of the EU, then Ireland could face, to use his words, real difficulties, and that could happen real quickly. Paul Cunningham, RTÉ News, Leinster House.
Well, with some 300 crossings along the border with Northern Ireland, the need to avoid a hard border is of huge concern to those who make the daily commute. Today, Brendan Wright made the short journey between Cavan and Clones to see just how frequent and complex these crossings are.
The main road from Clones in County Monaghan to Cavan town crosses in and out of the border with Northern Ireland several times in the space of just a few miles. It's an open frontier and it's been a fact of life here for many years. For 20 years now, this stretch of the border between Fermanagh and Monaghan has been entirely open. However, a no-deal Brexit could change all that, and it may well have significant implications for daily life in this area. Agriculture is a mainstay of the economy along the border. Near Cootehill in County Cavan, Frank Brady runs a pig farm with 9,000 animals. He's deeply concerned about the impact a hard border might have on his farm and on his neighbours.
I remember when I came up here in 1985 was when I came up here to live. The border was a big issue and you could spend hours going through the border, be it whatever you were doing. Now you just drive through, you don't even recognise, you've forgotten all about it. If that comes back, it's going to be a lot of hardship on people living on the border.
Clones is a busy market town in County Monaghan. During the Troubles, business here and community life were badly affected when many cross-border roads were closed off. Trade has recovered, but shopkeepers are concerned that a no-deal Brexit could mean a return to the dark days in the past.
A hard border here would, whatever little bit of trade we've generated in this and to make ourselves survive, would just be cut off. Our natural hinterland will be cut off, and that can't happen. It just can't happen, and I don't have the answer for you other than it can't happen, and everybody just needs to settle down and come to some agreement, and we just can't have it, and that's it.
Brendan Wright, RTÉ News, along the border in County Monaghan.
The travel plans of tens of thousands of air passengers continue to be disrupted this evening after all flights were again grounded at London's Gatwick Airport. The decision to halt services was made last night after staff saw 2 drones flying over the runway. The Army has now been called in to help. Police believe the disruption was caused deliberately.
Almost 24 hours on and flights into and out of Gatwick Airport remain grounded. It was shortly after 9 last night when 2 drones were seen hovering over the runway. Flights were halted, then resumed, then halted completely this morning as the drones returned numerous times last night and today. It's affected 760 flights and over 100,000 passengers.
We have disabled kids, we have children and all these things. I think we were first plane, which is 9:10, we're supposed to be flying, but we stranded 4 hours inside the plane without any information.
So can't really leave this queue because this seems to be the only place we could possibly find out any information. The queue looks like it's several hours long.
The Army has now been called in to help as police continue to search for those responsible for flying the drones.
We are committed with Gatwick to resolving the incident, and we have put in an awful lot of resources to try and get this resolved as quickly as possible. Clearly the most important thing here is the safety of the public. We've had the helicopter up and we've had over 20 units, and that's double crew, triple crew units working on this today to successfully resolve this in a safe way.
Airport authorities say they believe this has been a deliberate attempt to disrupt Gatwick.
This morning I talked about an irresponsible act. This afternoon I'm talking about an act that is deliberate. This is deliberately seeking to affect the many tens of thousands of passengers who wanted to fly from Gatwick today, this close to the Christmas period, and it's them who are paying the price of this deliberate act.
A further update is expected later this evening. Fiona Mitchell, RTÉ News, London.
Senior Gardaí have met with the Chief Executive of the Court Service to discuss security concerns following an incident in a Dublin courtroom today. A man was arrested and a controlled explosion was carried out following what the Bar Council described as a shocking incident as a family law case was underway.
The Army bomb disposal team arriving at the Phoenix House building in Smithfield. Members of the team investigated and a controlled explosion was carried out on a device which was not viable but was described as an elaborate hoax. The incident began shortly before midday when a man produced a realistic-looking replica firearm during a sitting of the Circuit Court hearing a family law case. He also claimed to have an explosive device. Armed Gardaí arrived within minutes and the man was arrested. The area was cordoned off and Lewis services were suspended for several hours. The incident has focused attention on security in the courts, particularly at buildings where family law proceedings are heard. In December 2015, a judge was assaulted while hearing a district court family law case in the nearby Dolphin House building. Airport-style security, where people and bags are scanned, is an operation at the public entrances here at the forecourts and at the criminal courts. But there's no such system at Phoenix House or other court buildings. A spokesperson said the judiciary and the court service had expressed ongoing concerns about the need for Gardaí at court sittings. The spokesman said a new family law complex planned for this site is awaiting approval and would have scanners at all entrances. Senior Gardaí met with the Chief Executive of the Court Service this afternoon to discuss security concerns. The Minister for Justice and Equality, Charlie Flanagan, said he was thankful no one was injured in the incident, but he was conscious of the impact on all who were in court at the time. He said the courts must always be able to operate without hindrance. Orla O'Donnell, RTÉ News, Smithfield in Dublin.
Legislation to allow for abortion services in Ireland has been signed into law by President Michael D. Higgins. Ireland voted decisively to repeal the 8th Amendment of the Constitution in May, with more than 66% of voters in favour of legalising the termination of pregnancy. Abortion services are scheduled to become available here from the 1st of January. The Health Service Executive says it expects a slight drop-off in elective inpatient activity for non-urgent patients next year. The announcement was made at the HSE service plan launch this evening, where it blamed capacity constraints for the reduction. The HSE also confirmed the budget for next year will be increased to a record €16 billion. Among the measures, it will allow for the opening of 202 additional beds across the country, but the HSE says it will only have sufficient funding to hire an additional 2,000 employees next year, compared with 4,000 in 2018. Well, our reporter Fergal O'Brien was at this evening's briefing and he joins us now. Fergal, capacity once again an issue here.
Yes, absolutely, Katrina. The Health Service Executive's National Service Plan for 2019 published in the last hour, and this comes after this year where we saw an overrun of around €700 million. The funding for this year is a record 16 billion. That's 848 million more than last year, an increase of some 5.6%. And as you say, bed capacity is a big issue in the health service here, and part of that money will be used to increase the number of beds, which will increase by around 202 in 14 locations across the country. But the HSE admitted this evening that bed capacity continues to outweigh demand, and as a result, some people will continue to experience delays waiting for admission to a hospital bed in accident and emergency departments next year. Now, as a result, the HSE said this evening that there will be a slight drop-off in the number of elective non-urgent procedures in public hospitals next year.
Our ultimate priority is always the patients most in need, as I said earlier on. So those will be patients, first of all, in emergency, and thereafter those patients that require urgent elective care. So we have, I believe, rightly prioritised those patients who in an emergency will require a bed. And regrettably, in the context of the capacity constraints, that may lead to some drop-off in elective inpatient activity for non-urgent patients, but we will seek to work with NTPF to ensure that the overall impact on patients is kept to an absolute minimum next year.
Now, they report this evening wide-ranging, covering a lot of areas, but one of the other areas in relation to recruitment, 4,000 people recruited by the HSE this year, but the service plan only allows for the recruitment of half that in 2019, with around 2,000 people set to be recruited during next year.
OK, thanks for those details, Fergal. The Irish Cancer Society is urging the HSE to stop using debt collectors to pursue cancer patients over outstanding hospital bills. Those without a medical card or private insurance can face fees of up to €800 per year. The Society says this causes distress and worry to patients going through treatment.